Okay.
Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ema. Hey, Ema.
Hey, my little sweetheart. How's my man?
Good. I'm good. I was actually watching a documentary this week. It's a Beatles documentary. I think it's called Get Back. It's like a 3-part series where each episode is like 3 hours. And it delves into how they made their live Get Back album. And what they were dealing with, and because what happened was they were trying to do like a TV show or a movie, and they had this tons of footage, and in the end they never used it until finally Peter Jackson, the guy who made the Lord of the Rings in the early 2000s, he took all the film that they made and he turned it into a documentary. It's really cool.
So is this documentary, where is it available?
You get it on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay. I do not have this Disney Plus. I don't feel like spending extra money on it.
Yeah, you can see clips on YouTube and whatnot. Like, I mean, it's very interesting. Where like one of the parts was like, I think was it Paul McCartney was talking about like the group's dynamics you start seeing the issues they were having with each other. It wasn't like any malice or anything like that. It's just that they were all so amazingly talented on their own, and then coming together and like creating music, it got difficult to a point where a lot of them were like, George Harrison wanted to go like make a solo album and he wasn't able to, and like you see they even have it recorded where it gets to a point where like they're recording and playing music and whatnot, and then all of a sudden, it's like lunchtime, so everyone's like, okay, it's lunch, all right, see ya. And George Harrison goes, okay, bye, I'm leaving. And they're like, okay. He's like, no, I'm leaving, I'm done. And he gets up and he just starts walking to the manager. It's like, yeah, I don't want to be here, I'm out of here, I'm done. And he walks out the door, and like basically that was like the moment that George Harrison left the Beatles.
Oh my gosh, just to pick up and leave in the middle of a recording session like that.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Because what happened was we got to a point where like Paul was the main one, at least in this documentary, the way it shows it. Paul was like the main ringleader who was in charge of everything. John Lennon was the one who was like getting his like act together and like getting stuff done, and like Paul and John would like work off of each other and create really good music. But then George Harrison would have all these great, amazing ideas, and it'd always be like, a side piece. It wouldn't really be focused. So George Harrison was being overshadowed, and that he wasn't able to create the music that he wants, because he has his own vision of music, and that's where it gets to this point. And like, so Paul McCartney, he predicted, he said the media is going to blame Yoko Ono for the Beatles breaking up, but that's not true.
Oh, okay.
It's because of all of us.
Yeah, because that's when I remember when they did break up. That there was you're right. The media did do that. The media like put out this rumor that it was because of Yoko Ono.
Yeah.
That they broke up. But I remember I saw on a when the Beatles were very, very popular, so recording, you could buy, of course, music books of their music with the chords and the lyrics and the melody, and every single song there was Paul McCartney and John Lennon.
Yeah,
all the songs were basically the collaboration of those two.
What was the first Beatles song you heard?
I'm trying to think. I Want to Hold Your Hand. That's the first one.
I want to pick your brain because I know you were in the Beatlemania craze. You were obsessed with them. You saw the movies. You did everything.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I liked them very much, but I mean, I wasn't really obsessed with them because all my friends were. So I decided to join the bandwagon. When their first movie, I think Hard Day's Night, came to Baltimore. It was the premiere in Baltimore, and of course, there were all these teenagers that were there. The movie theater was packed, and they were all jumping and screaming. And I really wasn't into that. But hey, everybody's jumping and screaming, and I want to be teenagers, you know how the 13, 14-year-old kids think they want to be part of the crowd. So I started jumping and screaming too.
So it's funny because like watching the documentary, it was like one giant decade-long group school project that they were doing,
Mhm.
and I just think it's so funny with like the music that they turned out. It was very short, like 2-3 minutes long. I think the total amount of all of Beatles songs put together all in a row would only accumulate to 10 hours.
Hmm. That's interesting. Well, I don't. Then well, of course, later on they came out. It was interesting how their music evolved, especially when they came out with the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club album.
Yeah.
That was when they branched out into the psychedelic type music.
So, what was your favorite Beatles song then?
Oh gosh. Trying to think. When I was a teenager, I think I was like 13, 14 years old. Michelle. I liked it. It was a very pretty, slow moving song. Also, at that time, I was dating a guy named Michael, who's he took French, and so his French name was Michel.
Okay. You're just all in your own little like romance world.
Yes,
stuff.
yes.
So when it came to, because I'm watching this documentary and I'm just so enthralled at such a piece of history, and that like you lived through it and you actually like enjoyed part of it, I would say. Were you like, you said you were a tag along fan, is what you were saying?
I'm the type of person in general who, when it comes to, I don't know, rock, I enjoyed rock music, but I was really a fan of classical music, of the Baltimore Symphony. The conductors at that time that were conducting the Baltimore Symphony, I would read newspaper articles about them. I would go to their concerts, that type of thing. I was quite a nerd.
Yes, you were. But you didn't care for Elvis, though.
Well, the funny thing is, none of the Jewish kids cared for Elvis when he first came out, because he was more like a, like a Prostagoysha greaser. That's how we felt about him. But then later on, when he got older and he gained some weight and he was less greasy,
You're more schlub.
Then the Jewish kids started to like him.
It's like you're too pristine. Sorry, you have to be more of a Nebuch in order for us to appreciate you. Oh God, that's funny. That is funny. So besides the Beatles and Elvis, what rock were you into?
Simon and Garfunkel.
Okay, Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah. Trying to think what else. Like I said, I was mostly into classical music. My favorite was I listened to all 9 Beethoven symphonies that were conducted by Toscanini and the NBC Orchestra.
Oh wow.
In those days, Pikesville Library had a classical section of record albums, and you could take them out. And almost every week, especially during the summertime, I was there. I was at Pikesville Library at least once a week, getting out the classical albums. And they had the entire series of all Beethoven 9 symphonies conducted by Toscanini and the NBC Orchestra.
It's amazing they had them.
That was my favorite.
I would think everybody would be like picking them up like left and right.
People returned them. People were very honest. They returned their things to the, well, it's like today also. Come on, you can get videos out of the library too, and most people are pretty honest and return them.
Yeah, no, I was talking about that. I was saying like, so many people would be, borrowing it. It would take forever for you to get in line in the queue, so you could actually go ahead and.
Nobody was interested in classical music, but I was. Would you believe I met a woman? Matter of fact, I went to we were in a carpool with this woman. Her daughter and I went to Peabody together.
Hmm.
And so we were in a carpool, and when her mother was driving one time, and I was talking about Toscanini, and she said she had a chance to meet him. Her father was a violinist in the NBC orchestra,
Oh, wow.
and she had a chance to meet Toscanini. And she said, really very nice man. He loved
Hmm.
kids,
That's
and
adorable.
he was talking to her, and it's not me, big conductor. I mean, this is the world's greatest conductor, and you were, just a very nice, ordinary man. And he was very olive complexioned.
Interesting.
Yeah, he remembers that about him. Very rich, dark olive complexion about him. But he was known though for I don't know the way conductors are today, but
Mm.
probably the way the world is going, he would never have gotten away today with the way he behaved in those days. In those days, I mean, I was listening to a biography, and they played a segment of one of his rehearsals with the NBC orchestra, and he just stops and he yells, "No, no, no, no!" I mean, he took his music very seriously, but he never had a piece of music in front of him. He had
Mm.
all the music memorized.
Wow.
And when you see pictures of him conducting, you don't see any music in front of him. He is conducting totally from memory. And oh boy, he had like the Italians are known for being like very fiery,
Hmm.
temperamental people. Evidently, he was. There was a story about this one trumpeter who I played a wrong note. He got so mad, he yelled at the guy and yelled at the guy and yelled at the guy, and finally at the end, fired him. Told him, "Get out, leave, you're fired." And the trumpeter, packed up his stuff, and he was going out of the concert hall, and he turned around and he yelled at Toscanini, "Nuts to you!" And
Nuts to you.
Toscanini says to him, "I'm sorry, it's too late for apologies."
Oh, that's funny. I was surprised he wouldn't say something else, like you effing whatever.
People were a little more, I don't know.
It's
There
more
was there was
posh, I guess.
there was less pub there was less cursing that went on, actually. I mean, behind the scenes, when you hear interviews from some of these older actors and actresses that performed during the 30s and 40s, there was plenty of real cursing that went on behind the scenes, but they tried to keep it
For the
public.
reps.
They try to keep it away from the public. Well, of course, FCC has their laws, and when I was growing up, if any radio announcer said even the word "damn"
Mm.
or "hell," oh my God, they could be fired. The FCC could throw them off the air. Well,
Wow.
you hear the story about Gone with the Wind, the famous story
Yeah,
about
yeah,
Red
and you,
Butler's last night, how there were some states that bleeped it out or something, or there were some places that wouldn't show the movie because of that. And like, it made a total furor, nationwide, that he actually said, that he didn't give a damn, and
gosh,
actually used that word.
yeah, it's funny you talk about like people losing their cool or whatnot. I'm on a Beatles kick right now. I'm telling you.
Uh-huh.
So I was watching a few John Lennon interviews where like someone did a YouTube clip of all these parts of like John Lennon working with other people and him just getting really pissed off and like just getting upset, and like at one point he was like being interviewed by like some newscaster, and he's like getting flustered because he's trying to explain something, and he's like getting very fired up and whatnot, and just it's so funny. But I was going to ask you, um do you remember when John Lennon got shot?
Oh, you bet I did. Yeah. Yeah, your father and I were like, wow, we couldn't we were listening to the radio, and it was like, oh my gosh. We just oh my God, it's like we could not believe it. It was like the president of the United States getting assassinated.
Really?
I am not kidding. Yep. That's how it affected a lot of people. Because it's such such an artist with such a popular artist that could you know get shot like that. Unfortunately, it's like I was thinking about that yesterday,
Really?
about famous movie actors and actresses that had been murdered by, say, stalkers.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, if you're that high profile of a person, you should really have a better security detail about yourself. Like I was thinking about like Sharon Tate.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the Charles Manson, the murderers, Sharon Tate murders. I mean, if you're that high profile of an individual, you should have such a security detail around your house to make sure that no kooks, I don't know what it was. I guess years ago, actors and actresses, had to draw like a very, very thin line between their, being secluded, protecting themselves, and also wanting to make themselves available to their fans. But I was thinking also there was, I forgot her name. About, it was about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago or so, there was this up and coming movie actress, brunette young lady, and some guy managed to, I think he hired a private detective to try to find out where she lived. And he managed to get to her and he shot her. He was like this crazy guy.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about her. I thought, my God, if she, if you're this up and coming, it led to the passing of a law in California, preventing private investigators from finding information about high profile people like movie actors and actresses, to prevent future events like this.
Wow. I
forgot what her name was. Serena was her name.
Serena
Was her name. Serena. I forgot who she was. And I was also thinking like, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, again, a high profile, and the speculation that it was not a drug overdose, that she was actually murdered. But there's also speculation that it might have been CIA, because evidently she knew too much.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
It's just, I don't know. It's like, I always thinking about so many different people, so many different artists that have made such an impact, and then their deaths being so brutal. And it's just like the 27 Club. Have you heard about that?
No, what's the 27 Club?
27 Club. It's a lot of artists that at the age of 27 they die, either by suicide or drug overdose or whatever. But it's at the age of 27, and it's just all sorts of famous artists that by the time they're 27 years old, they're dead.
Boy.
I think I know there's Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain. I'm trying to think.
A lot of those were drug overdoses.
Yeah. It was a lot of drug overdoses. It's just, it's just, that. Do you really have to be a tortured artist to make good work?
When I was taking music history, that topic actually came up.
Interesting.
Because the interesting thing about the Baroque composers like Bach, Telemann,
they had no
Vivaldi.
money, but
No, they had money. They did very well.
They're Baroque.
Ouch. Please get somebody else to write your material and don't give up your day job.
I try not to. All right,
but they were they were very level-headed. Haydn, except for, well, the possible exceptional, well, Mozart wasn't exactly Baroque. Mozart was going into the classical era. Haydn and Mozart were like the bridge between Baroque and classical. But Haydn, Bach, like I said, it's Vivaldi, Telemann, your Scarlatti, your Baroque composers were very level-headed, sane, moral individuals. Many, married family men. Well, Vivaldi was a priest, and they were not suffering artists at all. They weren't crazy. They weren't poor. They, Haydn especially, they did very well for themselves. And then you get into the classic era, and poor Beethoven was was known for being very, very temperamental. He was like he suffered a lot, of course, suffering artist.
Yeah.
Mozart was really, in many respects, off the wall. There are all sorts of stories about about the one story about one particular opera singer that wouldn't go on unless she had relations with him before the performance, which he obliged.
He had BDE.
He was quite known for being quite a character. And then Franz, and then you have Chopin. Oh God, Chopin. He was a sad, suffering artist. He could never settle down. He could never really. They said that his relationships very seldomly lasted after a couple months, and he had quite a bit of problems in Franz Liszt. With sad, to say he was also he also had some, he was very, very much in love with this woman who was royalty, and she was trying to get a divorce from her husband, and the Vatican would not. They were Catholics. The Vatican would not give her a divorce, and he finally, as a result of being brokenhearted, not being able to, to marry her, he just went ahead and became a priest at the end of his life.
Oh wow.
He gave up on the whole idea of romance. He just said forget it, and decided he became a religious Catholic, very, very religious Catholic, and of course became a priest. Then there was Wagner, who was totally crazy.
Yeah, he was an anti-Semite, right?
He was horrible. He didn't suffer though. He was he had a lot of money, and he lived very well, but he was really very nasty guy. Like I said, irrationally anti-Semitic. I think I talked about one of the programs that I had to write a report on his book on conducting at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in this conducting book, it was crazy. He would all of a sudden go into an anti-Semitic rant, like totally irrationally, in the middle of discussing some sort of musical concept that was so unrelated to anything with dealing with the Jews or religion or whatever. All of a sudden, we just break into this total horrible, irrational, anti-Semitic rant for no reason. So then I was thinking about George Gershwin, talking about like famous artists dying young. Yeah, George Gershwin, I think, was only 30 or 31. He died of a cancerous brain tumor. And you're talking about like the early 1930s, like mid 1930s, and I forgot when he lived. I think he died like during the 1930s. I mean, there was nothing, even today, never. There's not a lot you can do for brain cancer. It's more hopeful, but in those days, it was absolutely nothing that could be done.
I have a question. So going back to, you were saying that when John Lennon got shot, you and Tati were very, it felt like the president got shot.
Yeah, a lot of people felt that way. Yeah.
Did you ever listen to any of Tati's music?
What do you mean?
Did you ever listen to any of Tati's music?
What
He
we
had
mean Tati's
records.
music? Did he? Oh, I thought when you said Tati's music, I thought I don't know Tati composed music.
Oh,
Well,
I love it. You're hilarious.
let's put it this way. There was one time he was in the shower and I heard him screaming.
And he was singing. No, that's just Tati just
Yeah, and
being
I
a
thought
bad singer.
yeah, I thought he felt like it. I knocked at the door very frantically. Salmon, Salmon, are you okay? Salmon, are you okay? And he opened the door and said to me, I was singing.
Sound like a dead cat.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about like his music. Like, he liked
Grateful
the
Dead.
band. No, I don't think he liked the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, that was it. No, the Grateful Dead was his. Oh, he loved the Grateful Dead. That
Really?
was
He didn't
his
have any of his
group,
albums. At
man.
least I don't see anything.
What? I thought he had Grateful Dead albums. No.
Well, it's so
Yeah.
funny because the Grateful Dead, when I first heard about the Grateful Dead, I'm like, oh, it must be some heavy metal band. Da, da, da. I go and listen to it. It's like very slow, very mellow music, very like music just to chill to, just to relax. I'm like, this isn't the Grateful Dead.
He used to criticize me when I would listen to classical music. He goes, what are you listening to that junk for? That's just garbage. He goes, Grateful Dead. Now that's real music.
It's Grateful Dead's very it's just not my taste. But I liked his Moody Blues. Moody Blues were good.
Well, I like Moody Blues too. And the funny
Really?
thing is, when you spoke to like people when I was a teenager, Moody Blues hit the market and became popular. Would you believe friends of mine who, I hate classical music, can't see classical music, would tell me, oh, these Moody Blues, you've got to listen to the music. It's so beautiful. It's just like classical music. That's what they liked about it. They liked about it that they used elements of classical music. They used like they had like their background was a beautiful orchestra. The same people that, it's like there's a joke about people say, I hate classical music. So why do you have 1812 Overture as your telephone ringer? I didn't know that was classical music.
I tried to get into classical music. I really tried. You have no idea. I would listen to 91.5. The classical music station in Baltimore, and I would listen to these stations and try to really get into it and really listen to it. And I just couldn't. I couldn't get into it. It just didn't move me. I didn't care for it. I did not care for it.
So I'll tell you the truth. I don't like all classical music myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a bit of classical music. Actually, one of my music professors in college didn't even like the term classical music. He really didn't. He said he likes to call it instead what you would call serious music, as opposed to classical. Really, because if you think about classical music, quote unquote, the classical era was from about the time of you would say the time of Napoleon, about 1800 to about maybe 1840s, 1850s, something like that. Then that became like the Romantic era. So he says, when you talk about real classical music, you're talking about real. I'm talking about art or music that was composed or produced during that time. And so that's why he said he preferred the idea of like quote unquote serious music.
But I think any good music is serious music. That's what I liked about I like Moody Blues. I like the band. I listened to Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Foo Fighters, Nirvana. Like all these people, they take their music very seriously. It's just the problem is that with classical music, it's too stiff. They have to go by the rules so strongly. They're not letting themselves loose and trying to find themselves and refine themselves. They have like a list of rules. They abide by those rules. They have mathematical equations. They abide by those mathematical equations, and they go over it and over it and over it to get this complexity in things. But it's like, going to an art museum and sometimes seeing art, you could tell it's good, thoughtful art, and other stuff is just junk. But artists will tell you this big, long story about why it's so important. When the reality is the layman's looking at it, and it's like, that's not interesting. It's boring.
It's like, what is some of the modern art where you see it's like this white background with some red dot it's painted in the middle, and that's supposed to, and that particular painting like sold for like thousands of dollars because it was done by some op artist like years ago, and it's like, hey, my 2-year-old can paint like this too. Yeah.
That's also the other thing with art is that like it can get pretentious if you're not humble and level-headed and grounded. It can get really pretentious really quick. Like I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, or I have, but it probably wasn't passing. But I had like this professor from Micah that went to Morgan State and like taught us for a semester of architecture, and he was the most pretentious, self-righteous, self-centered person I've ever met in my entire life. And like he was just this guy trying to get us to be all philosophical. And Morgan State's a very practical university. We don't get into fluff. We don't do fluff. And so we're trying to do this fluff piece. And I'm trying to understand it, trying to figure him out. And during this time, like he's coming up with these other ideas, and then he just gets more pretentious about his attitude, and he just gets really mean. And he like starts like failing all the kids and like just not really explaining himself. And like he comes in with this like little stupid hat with his stupid scarf and like and his stupid coffee, just talking about like whatever thing there is. We're trying to get this idea out of him. Like, what do you want from us? What are you trying to accomplish? And he's just not, he's just not there.
So what happened eventually? I mean, he started failing students. So what was it? Was this an architecture class, or was this?
Yeah, it was an architecture. It was a studio class. So that means that we do all this. We do a lot of, more artistic part of architecture in it. And it just
he wanted you guys to really like think out of the box or something, or like,
really think outside the box. And it's just, he wasn't very encouraging. And he wasn't letting us grow. He was just kind of making us sink or swim. And a lot of kids like dropped the class and left the class. Some just went completely off and stopped doing architecture after him. I stayed in. I unfortunately, I got a C. It was my only C I ever got in college.
I'm surprised the students didn't go to the rest of the students didn't go to the. So what the dean of students do?
Well, he was gone after a semester. Didn't come back.
Good.
It was it. That was it. He was done. I don't think he ever came back.
Good. Unfortunately, though, you still got the. Were you one of the? Let's put it this way: were you one of the fortunate ones that you at least got a C out of the course?
Yeah, I got a C out of the course. I mean, by the end, I was figuring it out, but in college, it was the most frustrating thing. It was always at the end, did everything come together? Did I finally figure out what I needed to do? And by that time, it was just like a little too late, But like, it's fine. I got it. My GPA, I think, was a 3.4. It was a pretty decent. It's just, it is what it is. It just wasn't something I would say that like, I don't know. I always think about the fact that I went to Morgan and, the choices I made were just very practical financial choices. I wanted to go in Pratt. I wanted to be in New York. I wanted to be that architecture scene in New York City and live my life there. But like 2008 hit and, the recession hit really hard, and I wasn't going to risk, all this stuff that I couldn't visually see myself, with very little financial backing. I just didn't see it as a possibility. And I just saw a lot of my time being wasted. And that if I wanted to really use my expertise and delve into things, I felt like Baltimore was the better ticket. But I mean, whatever.
It might have been. It probably was. I mean, I made a similar decision, and then later found out I had a chance to go to Goucher. I got accepted to Goucher, and they gave me a partial scholarship, and which meant I would have had to work or borrow the money to meet the rest of the tuition. On the other hand, if I'd going to Towson was totally free. I mean, I didn't have to pay anything. This was like a total full scholarship, everything paid, books, fees, you name it. It was all paid.
Yeah.
And I thought about it and I thought, you know what? I don't want to start off life in debt, which would have happened. I would have started off, it would have been, well, so looking back now, I would have been $5,000 in debt, which, today, $5,000, are you kidding you? That's nothing. But in those days, it was something. And then later on, I found out that Towson had the better library. There were students from Goucher that were coming to Towson to use our library. I found out later that there were some professors that taught at both schools.
Yeah.
And not only that, but later on, I met people in the workforce who were working the same jobs I was.
And that's
and they graduated Goucher, I graduated Towson, and we were both earning the same amount and working the same jobs. And
it's so funny because I see that too. I see when I was at Morgan, people from Maryland, they cross-pollinated all the time. Maryland and Morgan cross-pollinated. Morgan always got the
in more ways than one.
Morgan always got the short end of the stick, but Maryland and Morgan always cross-pollinated. And when I started going into the labor force, I started meeting other people from Morgan, and I started seeing people from Maryland. And I started seeing people from Pratt and all these other big places, and we were all working the same place, getting paid the same. The only thing I have is that I guess I really went ahead and kind of glorified New York in my head, where it's just this. I think it's the most beautiful city in America to really just. If you really want to appreciate people and architecture and exploring those ideas, go to New York. You're not going to find it in Baltimore. You're not going to find it in Maryland. And I've always wanted to explore that, and I never got the real chance to do that.
Well, tell me, do you feel this? Do you still feel the same way about New York, despite all the
100%?
All the crime and a couple years ago, what they burned down Fifth Avenue?
Doesn't matter. That's part of people and nature. It's just part of life. It's just how people are. And New York, you get the most intense part of it. I feel it's all about survival. It's a very cities are all about survival, trying to handle human interaction. That's why you go out to the country if you don't want to deal with people. But the real place in this world is to see and deal with people. So you go to the cities. I think the more intense the city, the more vibrant it is.
I always felt the same way, in that I'm glad I lived in New York for 4 years. I'm very grateful for that. I found that living in a city like New York, taking the subway, having to adjust to a very fast moving, intense city like that, it was really good for me. I don't know, I guess in a way it kind of freed me. Because small town girl from Baltimore, always living with her parents, never really getting out on my own, and then to finally get out on my own and live in Brooklyn and having to handle New York City. I guess it toughened me up in a certain way, and it got me to have to handle the pressures of life.
Yeah.
And I didn't have mommy and daddy there. I wasn't living at home. I had to support myself. And then years later, when your sister was living in New York when she gave birth to her first child and second child, and I went up there to help her, and I had to take the subway for a few days in a row and bring her things while she was in the hospital. I was so grateful that I'd spent 4 years in New York. I thought, boy, I said, if I were handling, yeah.
Time is running out. Unfortunately, we got 10 seconds left.
That's it. Then okay.
Right.
I was just very grateful that the subway, didn't faze me. If I were handling the subway for the first time, I would have gone crazy.
Yeah. All right. I love you.
Love you, honey.
Take
care. Have a great Shabbos.
You too.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook at Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I know you would like it, and my mother would too.